The Red Sea, about 2,200 kilometers long, with a maximum width of 335 kilometers and a depth of up to 2,000 m, is a gulf of the Indian Ocean located between Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. In the north, the Sinai Peninsula divides it into two parts, the Gulf of Aqaba and the Gulf of Suez, the latter extending into the canal of the same name, which connects the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. The Red Sea is not only important because it is in a strategic location for trade, but also because it is mentioned in a passage of the Bible. The crossing of the Red Sea is an episode that belongs to the text of Exodus, the second book of the Bible, which recounts the slavery suffered by the Hebrews in ancient Egypt and their liberation thanks to Moses, who promised to lead them through the desert to reach the Promised Land. In the flight from their Egyptian persecutors, Moses, who led the Hebrew people, used his rod so that God separated the waters of the Red Sea, and thanks to this, the Hebrews crossed through a road, totally dry, pursued by the Egyptian army. Once safe, Moses again waved his arms and the waters of the Red Sea closed, drowning the Egyptians. Could this biblical passage be true? To find out, in 1978, researcher Ron Wyatt and two of his sons conducted the first search inside the Red Sea. Ron was a nurse anesthetist who belonged to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, something that led him to become obsessed with the Bible. He thought that the study of this book was a task that would occupy him a lifetime, a habit that he instilled in his 3 children. This obsession led him to learn about and carefully follow the biblical and historical records of the Exodus that led him to Nuweiba, a beach located on the Gulf of Aqaba. When Ron Wyatt visited Nuweiba, he saw a Phoenician-style column in the water. Unfortunately, the inscriptions were eroded, so he couldn't tell what it said on the column. However, in 1984, he found a second granite column on the opposite Saudi coast, identical to the first, but this time the inscription was intact. In Phoenician letters in archaic Hebrew, it contained the words Mizraim, Egypt, Solomon, Edom, Death, Pharaoh, Moses, and Yahweh. Then, after analysis, they believed that those words referred to the fact that King Solomon had erected these columns in memory of the miracle of the crossing of the sea. Eventually, the Saudi authorities removed this column and replaced it with a marker, believed to have done so in order to avoid the excessive influx of visitors that such an object would attract to the site. These clues led Ron and his 2 sons to think that this was the right place. So they began to look for some Egyptian chariot remains, because they wanted to prove that the Bible was not lying, that this was a real historical fact, and that really the Pharaoh's army that pursued the Israelites through the desert had perished under the waters, collapsing after splitting up. Although they lacked experience in diving, they were lucky. First, they saw a chariot wheel that was upside down, but when they tried to pick it up, it disintegrated almost completely because, being made of wood, it had not withstood the passage of time. However, the center of the wheel was preserved since it was metallic. They were the first to photograph several pieces of coral-encrusted carriages at the bottom of the Red Sea. Throughout the dives since 1987, Ron Wyatt found 3 gold 4-spoke chariot wheels. And although the coral does not grow on the gold was deformed because the wood inside was disintegrated. Among the finds was an 8-spoke wheel. This was analyzed by the director of Egyptian antiquities, who concluded that it could belong to the 18th dynasty. So he dated the Exodus to 1446 BC. According to the opinion, the 8-spoke wheel was used during the time of Ramses II and Thutmose. The Gulf of Aqaba is very deep. There are areas that measure more than 1,600 m. However, there is a place where, if the water were removed, it would be an easy descent for people and animals. This is the line between Nuweiba and the opposite coast in Saudi Arabia. Since Ron Wyatt made that great discovery, there have been several diving forays that have revealed more evidence. Among them, Dr. Leonard Mahler, who wrote The Exodus Case. Discovery Media Productions produced The Exodus Revealed, or filmmaker Tim Mahoney, who, after 10 years of research, made the documentary Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, among others. It should also be noted that a team of scientists, linked to the Faculty of Archaeology of the University of Cairo, discovered more than 400 different skeletons, as well as hundreds of weapons and pieces of armor, as well as the remains of 2 chariots, over an area of approximately 200 square meters. They rescued a blade from a khopesh that undoubtedly belonged to some important Egyptian personage. As there were no traces of boats or ships in the area, and the bodies were found wrapped in a large amount of clay and rock, it was thought that they might have been killed by a landslide or a tidal wave. For many centuries, this famous biblical story has been thought to be a symbolic account with no historical basis. But these discoveries could be undeniable proof of the veracity of one of the most important episodes of the Old Testament. Although, as it usually happens in these cases, there are always those who try to deny and discredit this finding, perhaps because of the religious implications worldwide. But what does science think about all this? Scholars have given different theories of how this biblical event could have occurred. One of them states that it could have been a tsunami. Another that there would have been a land bridge that today has disappeared due to erosion. The most recent hypothesis, published this year 2021 in the journal PLOS One and reported by scientists from the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR, and the University of Colorado at Boulder, CU, says that it could have been an ebb of the tides that caused the water to recede and expose the bottom of the sea. For that section of land to be released from the water, they had to apply a wind speed of 108 kilometers per hour for 12 hours in the simulations. Although the authors of the study themselves say that this would not explain the events that occurred, as related in the biblical text. We could then think that it could indeed have been that God mentioned in the Bible, or who knows? Perhaps extraterrestrial technology was used to cause the phenomenon that helped the Hebrew people to cross the Red Sea. The only thing we can observe are the findings of pieces of chariots, human and horse skeletons, wheels with 4, 6, and 8 spokes. And all this remains as a silent testimony of what happened in the Red Sea. We can only wait for new discoveries to reveal more secrets about this enigmatic and mysterious biblical passage.